April 20th, 1945. A field south of Nuremberg. The air tastes of metal and damp earth. It is the Führer's birthday, and the sky is falling. For 19-year-old Anneliese Richter, a Luftwaffenhelferin, the world has shrunk to the mud-caked platform of an 88mm flak gun. The gun, a beast of steel and grease, is cold to the touch. It has been silent for hours, its long barrel pointing accusingly at a sky empty of enemy bombers, but full of a terrible approaching rumble. The sound isn't from the air, it's coming from the ground, a low-frequency vibration that you feel in your teeth and in the hollow of your chest. It is the sound of the American Third Army. Anneliese pulls her thin wool greatcoat tighter, the fabric coarse and smelling of rain and fear. Her stomach is a tight, aching knot. Breakfast, hours ago, was a slice of dark, heavy bread made more from sawdust than rye, and a cup of bitter chicory coffee that did nothing to chase away the chill. It was the same meal she'd had for months. You get used to the hunger, she told herself. You get used to anything. But she never did. Around her, the battery is a study in exhausted fear. A handful of old men from the Volkssturm, their faces gray with fatigue, huddle by the ammunition crates. A boy of 15, his Hitler Youth uniform hanging loosely on his skeletal frame, fumbles with a Panzerfaust, his hands shaken. They are the last line of defense for a Reich that exists now only in maps and radio broadcasts. The real Reich is this churned-up field, the skeletal remains of a farmhouse on the horizon, and the incessant, grinding noise of approaching armor. Anneliese scans the tree line. Her job is to help track targets, to feed coordinates to the gunner, but the only targets now are the ghosts in her own mind. She thinks of her mother and younger sister in Berlin. Are they in a cellar? Do they have anything to eat? The last letter, weeks old, spoke of dwindling potato rations and endless nights of bombing. Guilt, sharp and acidic, rises in her throat. At least here, in the army, she gets a daily ration. At home, there might be nothing. A shout breaks the spell. "Panzer! Westlich! Panzer!" An old man points a trembling finger. And there they are, 3 of them, emerging from the woods like prehistoric monsters. M4 Shermans. They seem impossibly tall, their olive drab hulls slick with morning dew. They are not fast, but they are relentless. Anneliese's heart hammers against her ribs. The gun commander, a battle-hardened Feldwebel with one eye, screams orders. The crew lurches into motion. The metallic shriek of the breech block opening, the heavy thud of a shell being rammed home. The world becomes a cacophony of commands, the whine of the traverse motor, the frantic cranking of elevation wheels. Anneliese holds the headphones to her ears, the crackle of static a poor shield against the rising terror. The Feldwebel is shouting ranges, but the tanks just keep coming. They are using their machine guns now, tracers of angry red light zipping over the emplacement, kicking up dirt and whining past their helmets. A boy near the ready rack cries out, a thin, high sound, before slumping to the ground. There is no time to look, no time to think, just the gun. The 88 fires, a deafening, concussive roar that feels like a physical blow. The earth shakes. A plume of black smoke erupts from the lead Sherman. It slews to a stop, one track broken, but it is not dead. Its turret begins to turn, slowly, deliberately, like the head of a great predator. It is looking right at them. Anneliese knows, with a sudden, icy certainty, what is about to happen. There is a flash of orange from the Sherman's main gun, and for a fraction of a second, the world dissolves into pure white noise. She is thrown backward, the air punched from her lungs. Dirt and shrapnel rain down. When her vision clears, the flak gun is a twisted wreck, its barrel bent at a grotesque angle. The Feldwebel is gone. The others are screaming or silent. The rumble is closer now, overwhelming. Another Sherman grinds past the crippled one, its tracks churning the mud, its engine a deep-throated growl. It stops 20 meters from their position. Annalise pushes herself up, her ears ringing, her body a collection of aches. She sees the hatch on the tank open. A figure emerges, silhouetted against the gray sky. An American. He is holding a submachine gun. She lies still in the mud, her mind blank, every thought erased by the simple, profound finality of the moment. The soldier drops to the ground and runs toward her. His face comes into focus above her. He is young, younger than she expected, with eyes that are not filled with hate, but with something she can't read. Exhaustion, maybe? He says something in English, a language she barely understands. But the meaning is clear. For her, the war is over. The world becomes a blur of motion and foreign sounds. The American soldier, a corporal from the 11th Armored Division, helps Annalise to her seat. His grip is firm but not brutal. She stumbles, her legs feeling like water. Other GIs are moving through the ruined gun position, disarming the few surviving Volkssturm men, their movements efficient and practiced. The Americans don't shout. They speak in low, calm voices that are somehow more unnerving than screaming would be. Annalise is herded with the other captives, a pathetic collection of old men and teenage boys, their faces smudged with dirt and defeat. The sheer physicality of the Americans is the first shock. They are tall, their uniforms well-made and full. They move with an energy that seems alien. They are not the gaunt, haunted figures of German soldiers she is used to seeing. They look fed. Their cheeks are full. Their eyes are clear. It is a detail so mundane, yet so profoundly shocking, it makes her feel dizzy. This is the enemy propaganda warned of, the decadent, soft Americans. But there is nothing soft about the carbines they carry, or the methodical way they search their prisoners for weapons. They are marched down a muddy track, away from the smoldering battlefield. The air still smells of cordite, but it is mixing now with the scent of diesel from the American trucks lined up on the road. The sheer volume of equipment is staggering. Jeeps, 2.5-ton trucks, tanks, an endless river of olive-drab steel flowing into the heart of her country. It is a spectacle of industrial might that makes the Third Reich's war machine seem like a child's toy. They are loaded onto the back of a GMC truck, the canvas flap pulled down, plunging them into a dim, rattling twilight. No one speaks. The German soldiers sit with their heads in their hands, the boys stare blankly at the floorboards, and Annalise just tries to breathe. Every jolt of the truck sends a fresh wave of pain through her bruised body. She is a prisoner, a Gefangene. The word feels strange, unreal. What will they do to her? The stories she heard on the radio, stories of American barbarity, feel distant and foolish now, a fantasy from another life. The reality is this rumbling truck, this smell of unwashed bodies, and a deep, soul-crushing weariness. After an hour, the truck stops. The flap is thrown open, and harsh daylight floods in. "Rouse! Out!" The command is sharp. They are in a large, open field that has been turned into a temporary collection point, and the sight is breathtaking. There are thousands of them, thousands of German soldiers sitting in dense, silent crowds on the damp grass. Wehrmacht, Luftwaffe, SS, Volkssturm, a whole defeated army waiting under the watchful eyes of American guards in watchtowers. You see the scale of the collapse, the totality of the defeat, written on the faces of 10,000 men. Processing is swift and impersonal. Annalise stands in a long line, her feet numb with cold. An American officer at a field desk takes down her name, rank, and unit, his pen scratching on a clipboard. He looks at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, a young woman in a Luftwaffe uniform, but he says nothing. It is here that the second shot comes. As they wait, a GI walks down the line of prisoners with a cardboard box. He hands each person a small, dark brown bar wrapped in paper. He hands one to Annalise. She looks at it, confused. It is a Hershey's chocolate bar. She hasn't seen real chocolate in 4 years, not since the war began in earnest. There was ersatz chocolate, a waxy, bitter confection made of low-grade cocoa powder and saccharin. But this is different. The smell is rich and sweet. Around her, the men are tearing into the paper with trembling hands, eating the chocolate with a desperate, famished intensity. Annalise hesitates. Is it a trick? A strange form of cruelty? She looks at the guard who gave it to her. He just shrugs and moves on down the line. Slowly, she unwraps a corner. She breaks off a small piece and puts it in her mouth. The flavor explodes on her tongue. It is sweet, creamy, real. It is the most delicious thing she has ever tasted. The richness is so overwhelming it almost makes her sick. It is a taste of a world she had forgotten existed, a world without rationing, without hunger, without war. And as the chocolate melts in her mouth, a profound and terrible understanding begins to dawn. An enemy that gives away chocolate to its prisoners is an enemy that cannot be beaten. Not by them, not by a nation running on sawdust bread and bitter memories. She is loaded onto another truck, this one heading west, deeper into Allied territory, the strange, sweet taste of defeat still lingering on her tongue as the gates of a vast, sprawling camp of tents and barbed wire come into view. The camp is named Auteuil, near Compiègne in France. It is one of the so-called cigarette camps, a massive transit center for prisoners of war. To Annalise, it looks like a city of canvas and mud, stretching for miles under a perpetually gray sky. The sheer organizational scale of it all is hard to comprehend. Barbed wire fences divide the camp into enormous pens, or cages, each holding thousands of captured Germans. The processing continues, but here it is more thorough. She is separated from the male soldiers and taken to a women's compound, a smaller section of the vast camp, but still holding hundreds of female auxiliaries, nurses, and signal operators. There is the humiliation of delousing, a shower with harsh lye soap under the indifferent watch of female American military police, and the issuance of a simple set of clothes. Everything is designed to strip away her former identity, to render her anonymous, just another number on a long list. The fear that had been a constant companion since her capture begins to fade, replaced by a dull, aching emptiness. She is a cog in a vast, efficient machine of enemy logistics. But it is later that day that the true psychological dislocation begins. A whistle blows, a shrill, piercing sound that echoes across the muddy compound. It is time for the evening meal. The women are formed into long lines and marched toward a massive tent, larger than any she has ever seen. The smell hits her from 100 meters away. It is not the familiar thin scent of turnip stew or boiling potatoes that characterized every German field kitchen for the past 3 years. This is a complex, layered aroma. It is the smell of roasting meat, of baking bread, and something else, something dark and rich and almost mythical, the smell of real coffee. Inside the tent, the noise is deafening. The clang of metal trays, the shouted orders of the American quartermasters, the low murmur of thousands of voices. The women shuffle forward, grabbing a tray and a cup. Annalise watches, her mind struggling to process the scene. Huge, steaming vats are lined up, attended by German prisoners assigned to kitchen duty. In the first vat is a thick, brown stew filled with chunks of what looks like actual beef and pieces of potato and carrots. In the next, a mountain of boiled peas. And then she sees it, and her breath catches in her throat. Slices of bread piled high in wicker baskets. But it is not the dark, dense Kriegsbrot she knows. It is white. Perfectly, impossibly white. A server slops a ladle of stew onto her tray, followed by a spoonful of peas. Another prisoner hands her 2 thick slices of the white bread. At the end of the line, a corporal fills her tin cup with steaming black coffee from a spigot. She finds a space at a long wooden table, squeezed between a middle-aged army nurse and a young signals operator who is silently weeping into her hands. Annalise stares at the food on her tray. It is more than she has eaten in a single day in over a year. The steam from the stew warms her face. It looks rich, greasy, nourishing. The bread is soft to the touch. The coffee smells like heaven, but she cannot bring herself to eat. A cold suspicion grips her. Is it drugged? Is it some kind of test? Around her, the reactions are varied. Some women tear into the food with a feral hunger, not stopping to breathe. Others, like the girl next to her, just cry, overwhelmed. The older nurse beside Annalise picks up her spoon with a steady hand. "Essen Sie, Kind," she says, her voice gentle. "Eat, child. There is no poison here but the one in our own minds." Annalise looks at the food again. The hunger, a constant dull ache for years, is now a raging fire in her belly. Her body is screaming at her to eat, but her mind is still at war. To accept this food feels like a betrayal of her comrades who died fighting, of her family starving at home, of the entire worldview she has been taught. This is enemy food. This is the food of the victors. Eating it feels like admitting defeat in the most intimate, personal way possible. She thinks of her mother trying to make a soup from potato peels and weeds. She thinks of her sister, whose face in her memory is pale and thin. The guilt is a physical weight pressing down on her chest. How can she sit here before this feast while they suffer? But the aroma of the coffee, the sight of the meat, the sheer undeniable reality of the food on her tray is too powerful. With a trembling hand, she picks up a slice of the white bread. She brings it to her mouth and takes a small bite. It is soft, almost fluffy. It tastes of nothing but pure, clean flour. It melts on her tongue. And in that moment, as she takes the first bite, the entire foundation of her world crumbles. The days at Attiki blur into a monotonous routine, a rhythm dictated not by military bugle calls or air raid sirens, but by the relentless schedule of meals. 3 times a day, the whistle blows, and the women line up for their rations. Breakfast is often oatmeal, sometimes with powdered milk and sugar, and always coffee and white bread. Lunch is a stew or a thick soup. Dinner is more of the same. It is not a gourmet menu, but it is substantial, consistent, and nourishing. For women who have lived for years on the edge of malnutrition, whose bodies have learned to survive on a few hundred calories a day, it is a physiological shock. Within weeks, Annalise sees the change in herself and the others. The hollows in their cheeks begin to fill out. The sallow, gray tinge of their skin is replaced by a healthier color. The constant gnawing hunger that had been the background noise of their existence for so long finally begins to recede. They are, for the first time in years, getting enough to eat. But as their bodies heal, their minds begin to unravel. The food, a source of life, becomes a source of profound psychological torment. The consistency of the meals underscores the finality of their situation. There is no hope of a sudden breakthrough, no dream of a final victory to sustain them. There is only the endless cycle of waiting and eating. The white bread, in particular, becomes a powerful and divisive symbol. Its softness and purity are a constant tactile reminder of the vast, unbridgeable gap between their former lives and their current reality. You can see the women hoarding it, wrapping slices in scraps of cloth and hiding them in their bedding, an instinct born of years of scarcity that they cannot unlearn. They are surrounded by a relative abundance of food, yet they act as if starvation is just around the corner. It is a form of madness. The camp is filled with food, but it is starved of information. News from the outside world is scarce, filtered through rumors and the occasional, heavily censored announcement from the American camp authorities. The women know nothing of their families, their homes, their cities. Their conversations, held in hushed tones in the long, cold nights in the tents, are a constant loop of fear and speculation. They talk about home. They try to imagine what is happening in Berlin, in Hamburg, in Dresden. Is anyone left alive? Is there anything left to eat? Every meal in the camp becomes an act of guilt. Annalise finds herself performing a painful calculation with every bite she takes. This piece of bread, she thinks, this is a piece my sister does not have. This spoonful of stew is more meat than my mother has seen in a month. The food nourishes her body while it poisons her soul. She starts to dream of food, but they are not pleasant dreams. She dreams she is sitting at a vast banquet table, piled high with everything she could ever want, but her family is on the other side of a glass wall, their faces pressed against it, their eyes wide with hunger. She wakes up with tears on her face and the taste of shame in her mouth. The American guards are a constant presence, but they remain distant figures. They are not the cruel monsters of Goebbels' propaganda. They are mostly young men, bored and homesick, who perform their duties with a weary professionalism. They do not fraternize, they do not brutalize. Their very indifference is a form of psychological pressure. It reinforces the women's status as mere objects, as inventory to be managed, fed, and contained. One day, Annalise watches a guard carelessly toss a half-eaten sandwich into a rubbish bin. The sight hits her with the force of a physical blow. The casual waste of such a treasure, bread, meat, cheese, is an act of blasphemy against the religion of hunger she has practiced for so long. It is a gesture that says more about the wealth and power of America than 1,000 tanks or bombers ever could. It tells her that the war was lost long before she ever stood by her flak gun. It was lost in the wheat fields of Kansas, in the stockyards of Chicago, in a country that could afford to throw away a sandwich. A rumor begins to circulate through the barracks, passed from one woman to the next in urgent whispers. It's a rumor about a radio broadcast a guard was listening to. The fighting in Berlin is over. Hitler is dead. The war, the real war, is finally ending. The official announcement comes on May 8, 1945. An American officer, speaking German through a crackling loudspeaker, informs the entire camp of the unconditional surrender of all German forces. Victory in Europe. VE Day. A strange, heavy silence falls over the women's compound. There are no cheers, no cries of relief. There is only a profound, hollow stillness. The war is over, but they are still prisoners. Peace has come to the world, but not to them. The end of the fighting does not mean freedom. It simply means their defeat is now absolute and irreversible. For Annalise, the news changes everything and nothing. She is still behind barbed wire. She still knows nothing of her family's fate. The routine of the camp continues, unaltered. The whistle still blows 3 times a day. The lines still form. The vats of stew are still steaming in the mess tent. But now, the food tastes different. It no longer tastes of shock or guilt. It tastes of utter, complete subjugation. Each meal is now a ritual of surrender. Every slice of white bread is an admission that her nation, which promised a 1,000-year reign, could not even feed its own people. Every cup of coffee is a tribute to the enemy's staggering logistical supremacy. The food is no longer a source of wonder. It is a symbol of their power and her powerlessness. The women in the camp grow quieter, more withdrawn. The initial shock has worn off, replaced by a deep, chronic anxiety about the future. What will become of them? What will become of Germany? They are being kept alive, fed, and sheltered by their conquerors, while their homeland lies in ruins. They are suspended in a strange limbo, a gilded cage where their basic physical needs are met, but their spirits are being systematically crushed by uncertainty. The letters begin to arrive in early June. At first, it is just a trickle, then a flood. The American and Red Cross mail systems, slowly grinding back into motion, begin to bridge the vast abyss that had separated the prisoners from their homes. Mail call becomes the most anticipated and most dreaded moment of the day. Annalise watches for weeks as other women receive news. She sees their faces as they read. Some weep with joy, learning that a husband or a brother is alive. Many more collapse in grief, reading the stark, simple words that announce a death. Her own name is finally called one overcast afternoon. The envelope is thin, the handwriting her mother's, but it is shaky, unfamiliar. She takes the letter to a quiet corner of the compound, her heart pounding so hard she feels it in her ears. She sits on the damp ground, her back against a fence post, and unfolds the single flimsy sheet of paper. The letter is short. Her mother and sister are alive. They survived the final apocalyptic battle for Berlin. A wave of relief, so powerful it makes her gasp, washes over her. But as she reads on, the relief curdles into horror. Her mother describes the city, a landscape of rubble where people live like rats in the cellars of bombed-out buildings. She writes of the hunger, a hunger that makes the worst days of the war seem like a time of plenty. There is no food. The ration cards are worthless. People are eating weeds, tree bark. They are starving. The letter ends with a simple, desperate plea. If you can, try to send something, anything. Annalise reads the letter 3 times, the words blurring through her tears. Later that evening, the whistle blows. She moves like an automaton, joining the line, taking a tray. A server slops a generous portion of beef goulash onto it, next to a scoop of mashed potatoes. He hands her 2 slices of bread. She takes her tray to a table and sits down. She stares at the food. The rich, savory smell of the goulash fills the air. The potatoes are creamy. The bread is soft. It is a meal fit for a king compared to what her family endures. She pictures her mother, her face thin and desperate, boiling weeds for supper. She pictures her little sister, crying from hunger. And here she sits, a prisoner of war, with a plate full of food provided by the very people who destroyed her city. The irony is so vast, so cruel, it is suffocating. She picks up her spoon, but she cannot lift it to her mouth. The food on her tray, this proof of her own survival, has become the most obscene thing she has ever seen. It is the taste of a victory that is not hers, and the bitter, indigestible taste of her own profound and lasting defeat.